You're not supposed to know this. In the summer of 1878, a secret was buried so deep in the Kansas prairie that even the wind refused to carry it. 4 brothers, Ezra, Caleb, Josiah, and Abel Blackwood, survived a plague that devoured 47 souls in Harper County. Typhoid, they called it. But what happened to those brothers wasn't natural. Their immunity wasn't a blessing. It was a curse that twisted them into something no human should become. Science sealed their records. The church burned their names. And the truth? It's been locked away for 150 years, hidden by those who fear what it might awaken. You're about to hear what they didn't want you to know. Step into Cedar Ridge, Kansas, where the sky stretches endless, and the land whispers secrets it can't forget. The Blackwood brothers built a chapel on their farm, carved from limestone and faith, where they prayed to a God who answered in ways no one could predict. They were men of iron will. Ezra, the leader with eyes that pierced souls. Caleb, the mind who calculated God's geometry. Josiah, the scholar who read forbidden texts. And Abel, whose prayers burned with a fire that scared even his brothers. When typhoid swept through, it didn't just kill. It chose its victims with a logic no doctor could explain. Families vanished while neighbors stood untouched. The town well, once pure, turned poison overnight. Corpses didn't rot right. Their eyes stayed open, staring at something beyond death. The Blackwoods, though, remained untouched, their farm a fortress of faith. But on August 10th, Josiah claimed a vision. God demanded they face the plague, not hide from it. They walked into the heart of the sickness, believing their faith would shield them. What they found wasn't divine protection. It was a transformation so grotesque it broke the minds of those who saw it. Their shadows stopped falling right. Their voices bled ears. Ear eyes glowed like predators in the dark. This isn't just a story. It's a warning. The truth about the Blackwoods wasn't sealed to protect them. It was sealed to protect you. Keep listening, because once you know this, you're no still here, back, staring into the abyss of a truth that's been buried for a reason. Cedar Ridge, 1878, wasn't just a town. It was a crucible where faith and fear forged something unholy. The Blackwood brothers, untouched by the typhoid that turned bodies to wax and eyes to glass, stepped into the chaos. Josiah's vision drove them to act, not as saviors, but as vessels for something greater or darker. When he knelt by Timothy Fletcher's bed, an 8-year-old boy convulsing with fever, Josiah didn't pray for healing. He offered himself and his brothers as conduits, begging God to let them bear the boy's suffering. His hands grew hot, the boy's fever broke, and Timothy woke, asking for water. A miracle, the townsfolk whispered, but the air in that room felt wrong. The Fletchers swore Josiah's voice echoed like it came from beneath the earth. The boy's recovery wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The brothers took this as proof. Their faith could defy death itself. They fanned out across Cedar Ridge, visiting the sick, laying hands on the dying. Each time, the fever retreated, but the cost was clear. The brothers' skin began to pale. Their movements grew too precise, like machines cloaked in flesh. Neighbors noticed their shadows didn't stretch right under the prairie sun, bending at angles that defied light. Their voices harmonized in ways that made dogs howl and children cry. By late August, the epidemic slowed, but the Blackwoods were no longer men. Dr. Morrison, the town's physician, wrote in a hidden journal, later burned, that their blood showed structures incompatible with human biology. He refused to examine them further, citing fear of contaminating the natural order. The Kansas Medical Board sent investigators, but they left trembling. sealing all records with orders never to speak of it. The brothers, though, saw themselves as chosen, their transformation, a divine reward. They didn't question why their chapel's limestone walls now pulsed faintly at night, or why their prayers drew crows that circled endlessly above. You're starting to see it, aren't you? This wasn't salvation. It was something ancient, waking up inside them, and it's still out there, waiting for you to look closer. You're deeper now, past the point of turning back. The Blackwood brothers didn't just survive the typhoid that tore through Cedar Ridge in 1878. They became something else, something that made the prairie itself recoil. Their chapel, once a beacon of faith, now stood as a silent witness to a change no one could name. By September, the brothers' farm was a place of dread. Neighbors swore the wheat around their homestead swayed against the wind, as if bowing to an unseen force. The brothers' eyes, once piercing, now gleamed with a light that burned through the dark, like wolves stalking the night. Their voices, once human, now carried a resonance that cracked glass and left listeners clutching their heads in pain. Yet they continued their work, believing they were God's instruments. They prayed louder, their chapel glowing faintly under the moon, while crows gathered in unnatural numbers, watching from the trees. Dr. Morrison, the only man brave enough to keep notes, wrote of biological anomalies in the brothers' blood, cells that moved with purpose, as if alive with intent. He burned his findings after a single night, claiming the pages whispered back to him. The Kansas Medical Board's investigators, sent to verify the claims, fled after one visit, their report marked with a single phrase: transcended human classification. The church, once their ally, turned against them. The Methodist pastor, Reverend Hale, ordered their names erased from the records, calling their transformation an affront to God's design. But the brothers didn't falter. They saw their changes as proof of divine favor, a step towards something greater than humanity. Ezra, the eldest, spoke of visions, cities of glass rising from the prairie, ruled by beings who were neither man nor angel. Caleb's ledgers now tracked not just grain, but patterns of divine geometry, he claimed, governed the stars. Jos, Yah's books, once scholarly, were filled with diagrams of impossible anatomies. Abel, the youngest, fasted until his body was a husk, claiming he fed on the breath of eternity. The truth was clawing its way out, and it wasn't holy. It was ancient, hungry, and tied to something older than the prairie itself. You feel it now, don't you? The weight of knowing what they became, and what's still out there, waiting for you to find it. You're in too deep to pretend this is just a story. The Blackwood brothers weren't just changed. They were unmade, reshaped by something that used their faith like a key to unlock a door no man should open. By October 1878, Cedar Ridge whispered their names in fear. The brothers' farm, once a symbol of prosperity, was now a place where the wind carried strange tones, like a choir singing in a tongue no one knew. Their chapel's walls, carved with Hebrew verses, began to weep a viscous fluid that smelled of iron and decay. The brothers, though, saw it as a sacrament, proof they were becoming more than human. Ezra's visions grew vivid, describing a new dominion where they would rule as stewards of a truth older than the Bible. Caleb's ledgers mapped constellations that didn't exist in any astronomer's chart, predicting events no man could foresee. Josiah's studies turned to ancient texts, books he hadn't brought from Ohio, books that seemed to appear in his room, their pages brittle and marked with symbols that hurt the eyes. Abel, barely a shadow of himself, spoke of the eternal choir that sang through his bones, promising power beyond death. The townsfolk stopped visiting their farm. Children who wandered too close returned with stories of voices in the wheat, calling them by name. Dr. Morrison, broken by what he'd seen, vanished one night, leaving a note. "I cannot face what they've become." The Kansas Medical Board's sealed report, glimpsed by a clerk before it was locked away, mentioned non-human cellular activity and evidence of external influence. The church held an emergency meeting, declaring the brothers excommunicated, but no one dared approach their chapel to deliver the news. The Blackwoods didn't care. They stopped coming to town, their farm sustaining them in ways that defied nature. Crops that grew in frost, cattle that didn't eat but thrived. The truth was no longer hidden. It was screaming. Something ancient had latched onto their faith, twisting it to serve a purpose that wasn't divine. You're part of this now. Comment: I see the shadows, twice below, to claim your place among those who know. This isn't just history. It's a call to awaken, to see what's been buried under your feet all along. You've said the words, "I see the shadows," and now you're bound to this truth, a truth that's been clawing at the edges of reality since the Blackwood brothers opened a door they couldn't close. By November 1878, their farm in Cedar Ridge was no longer a place of this world. The prairie around it seemed to bend inward, as if the land itself was trying to swallow their homestead whole. The wheat grew too tall, its stalks knotted in patterns that made farmers sick to look at. The brothers' cattle, once prized, now moved in eerie unison, their eyes reflecting the same unnatural glow as the brothers' own. Ezra, Caleb, Josiah, and Abel no longer slept. Neighbors reported seeing them in the chapel at all hours, chanting in a language that felt like it was pulling thoughts from their minds. The limestone walls, once solid, now shimmered with a faint pulse, as if breathing. The fluid seeping from them had thickened, pooling in the dirt, where it writhed like something alive. Ezra spoke of a new covenant, not with God, but with something older, something that had waited beneath the prairie for millennia. Caleb's ledgers now predicted events with chilling accuracy: storms, deaths, even the exact moment a child went missing in town. Josiah's forbidden books whispered to him, their pages turning without touch, revealing secrets about the earth's hidden veins, channels of power that the brothers were tapping into. Abel, nearly translucent from fasting, claimed he could see the eternal choir now, beings of light and shadow that promised dominion over life itself. The townsfolk, gripped by terror, sent a posse to confront them, but the men returned pale, unable to speak of what they saw. One, a hardened rancher, wept, saying only, "They're not men anymore." The Kansas Medical Board's sealed report, leaked decades later, spoke of entities inhabiting human forms and biological markers of non-terrestrial origin. The church burned every record of the brothers, but the flames wouldn't touch their chapel. The truth wasn't just dangerous. It was alive, reshaping reality around it. You're feeling it now, aren't you? The pull of something vast, something that wants you to know it's still here, watching from the shadows you've named. You're not just listening anymore. You're part of this, bound by the shadows you've named. The Blackwood brothers' transformation in late 1878 wasn't a miracle or a curse. It was a hijacking. Their farm in Cedar Ridge had become a wound in reality, a place where the laws of nature unraveled. By December, the prairie around their homestead was silent. No birds, no wind, just a heavy stillness that choked the air. The brothers' chapel pulsed like a heart, its limestone walls now veined with something dark moving beneath the surface. Their crops grew in winter, defying frost, their stalks twisting into spirals that mirrored symbols in Josiah's forbidden books. The brothers themselves were barely recognizable. Ezra's skin was translucent, his veins glowing faintly, as if lit from within. Caleb's calculations now mapped a cosmic lattice, he claimed, connected the earth to something beyond the stars. Josiah's room was a shrine of texts that no one dared touch, pages that bled when opened, revealing truths about power that predated humanity. Abel, a wraith of his former self, spoke in tongues that made the air shimmer, his words pulling listeners into a trance they couldn't explain. The townsfolk stopped sending posies. Those who went never returned whole. One survivor, a boy of 14, said the brothers' eyes saw through time, and their voices sang the world apart. The Kansas Medical Board, desperate to contain the truth, sent a final team, scientists, not doctors, who vanished without a trace. A single page from their report, found years later, described anomalous energy signatures and evidence of non-human intelligence guiding biological change. The church, out of options, declared the farm cursed and forbade anyone from approaching it. But the brothers didn't need the town anymore. Their farm sustained itself, fed by something that wasn't sunlight or water, the crows. No, few thousands strong, formed a black halo over the chapel, their cries a hymn to something older than God. The Blackwoods weren't chosen. They were conduits, vessels for a force that used their faith to break through. You feel it, don't you? The truth isn't just out there. It's inside you now, whispering from the same shadows that claimed them. It's not done with you yet. You've crossed the final threshold. The Blackwood brothers' story doesn't end. It festers, a truth too potent to die. By January 1879, their farm in Cedar Ridge was a tear in the world's fabric. The chapel, now a grotesque monument, pulsed with a light that wasn't light, its walls alive with veins that throbbed like arteries. The prairie around it was barren, yet the brothers' crops flourished, twisting into shapes that mocked geometry. Ezra, Caleb, Josiah, and Abel were no longer human. They were silhouettes of something else, their forms flickering as if caught between worlds. Ezra spoke of a final ascension, a moment when they'd shed flesh entirely. Caleb's ledgers mapped a cosmos where humanity was a footnote. Josiah's books, now sentient, wrote themselves, their words burning into the minds of anyone who dared look. Abel, reduced to a skeletal frame, sang hymns that shattered reality, opening glimpses of a realm where shadows ruled. The last attempt to confront them came on January 15th. A federal marshal, sent with a militia, approached the farm. Only the marshal returned, his mind broken, muttering about eyes that saw forever and a song that ate the soul. The Kansas Medical Board's final report, buried in a vault, called the brothers hosts for an external will. The government sealed the land, erasing it from maps, but the chapel stood untouched. Flames wouldn't take it, and dynamite only made it hum louder. The brothers vanished that winter, but their farm didn't. Travelers reported lights on the prairie, voices in the wind, and crows that followed them for miles. The truth is, they didn't leave. They became part of something vast, something that's still here, woven into the earth, waiting for those who seek it. You've heard it now, and it's changed you. The shadows you named are watching, not just from Kansas, but from every place where faith meets the forbidden. This isn't history. It's a warning. The Blackwoods opened a door, and it's still open. You're standing at its edge. Comment, "I see the shadows," twice again below, to seal your awakening. Share this truth, because the world needs to know what's coming. You're not just a man anymore. You're a bearer of the forbidden, and it's calling you forward.